Hello everyone, welcome back to Dark Knight Tales. Before we dive in, please show your support, give this video a like and be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. So let's get started. The first story. My son's camera monitor alerted in the middle of the night. I checked it and saw my wife and son sitting on the bed. They weren't my wife and son. I'm a nurse and I currently work nights. It's a total drag, but I'm hopeful I can go to days soon since some co-workers are planning retirements. Anyway, I was working one night when just after 3 a.m. my son's monitor alerted me to sound and movement. No big deal at all, he probably coughed loudly or sneezed or something. He's 3 now, so he generally sleeps all night. I bring it up on my phone and I see him and my wife sitting on the bed. Again, no big deal, he might have cried out or gotten scared or something. I was about to close the app when I noticed they were acting strange, almost creepy. And when I say almost creepy, I mean creepy as balls. They were sitting on the bed together, both of them just staring up at the camera with blank, emotionless stares. The night vision is black and white, so they have white, eerie-looking eyes. They didn't move at all aside from their visible breathing, they just sat there staring at the camera. I close the app and give my wife a call to make sure everything is okay. I never get to call home on lunch, so in a way this is kind of nice to get to talk to my family while at work. It rings a couple times before she answers with a very groggy hello. It was like she was dead asleep when I called and she looked wide awake when on the camera. "Hey, you guys okay?" "Huh? Yeah. Buddy, my son's nickname, came in like 15 minutes ago, seemed scared, so I said he could sleep with mama. I'm confused here since I saw them in his room a minute ago. Literally 60 seconds had passed since I closed the app and made the call. Wait, so you guys are in bed?" "Yeah, I fell back asleep right away. Everything okay? Everybody keeps waking me up." She's kind of annoyed. Hang on a second, I put her on speaker and bring up the app, hoping I don't see it. When the app loads, I get that pang of intense nervousness in my stomach that I haven't had in a long time, since I was a kid in school and realized while I was eating breakfast a paper or something was due that day and I hadn't done it. My heart leaps into my throat. My wife and son are sitting on his bed looking up at the camera, same emotionless stares. "Hello? You guys are in bed, right?" "Yeah, we're trying to sleep." "Well, I'm looking at his camera and I see you two sitting on his bed." "Huh? No. We're in our bed." "I know that's what you mean, but I'm looking at his bed and you two are in there." "Hang on," she says. She's quiet for a second while she brings up the camera on her phone. I hear this guttural, terrified gasp. Like she had sucked all the air in the room into her lungs, filling them to capacity. I don't hear this kind of gasp from my wife often, usually only when she's truly afraid, like during a jump scare in a movie or one time when we turned her back on our son for literally a second and he was down by the mailbox inches from the road. I hear rustling of sheets and the line goes dead. Of course now I'm absolutely terrified myself, so I immediately call back. It goes to voicemail, so I call again. I call again and again with no answer. Finally, after about 4 minutes, she calls me. I tell you that 4 minutes felt like 40 years. "Hey, what's happening?" I ask. She's absolutely hysterical and crying. I can't understand a word she says. "Stop. Slow down for just a second," I say. She slows down enough to explain they're in the car and driving to her parents'. She looked at the camera and when she saw what was on it, she got up and grabbed our son and rushed downstairs and out the door. Didn't even close the garage. "Don't worry about it," I said. "I'll drive by when I get off and close it. We live in a generally safe neighborhood, so I'm not too concerned the door is up." "You will not go in there," she says. "Hell no," I return. "Why are we on the camera?" she asked. "Is it a recording?" "I don't know," I return. "I'm gonna keep watching it and see if there's anything I can tell." Do our code words with Buddy. We have code words because we're nerds. We've seen too many pod people and imposter movies, so we decided a long time ago to make code words with each other to be able to tell if one of us was an imposter. We have a couple code words, but we also have a 3-sentence story we recite together, each saying a different part alternately of each other. I hear her on the phone saying the things we taught our son. He giggles as he says them. He does every time we practice, since he thinks they're a joke and doesn't have any idea of the real meaning. We're both convinced he's our son. My wife then says our part and I'm convinced she's her. We made up these words as a complete joke to ourselves. I never once in my life ever imagined we'd actually need them. Unreal. She got to her parents safely and it was hard to hang up. I told her we'll figure it out in the morning, hopefully just a glitch. She said she didn't think it was a glitch. When she was running out she had to run by her son's room and the door was open. There's a little flashing light on the back of the camera that indicates it's connected to the internet. It gives off just enough light that when she ran by she thought she saw, out of the corner of her eye, a shadowy outline of what could have been an adult sitting on our son's bed. It sends chills down my spine to think about. Knowing they were safe and out of the house is the only thing that kept me at work that night. It was a long 4 hours but I kept checking the camera every chance I got. Sure enough, they were still sitting on the bed staring up at the camera with emotionless gazes. I studied them to see if I could see any pattern, from their breathing to their blinking. Their breathing was steady and looked normal. It was their blinking that would tell me if this was just some kind of bizarre, time-looped freak accident video or not. I intently stare at my phone and count the seconds between each blink, telling myself if this is a loop then their blinks should be even and occur at the same time each time. There was no pattern to their blinking. It was erratic and random, just as a person blinking should be. The passing hours are what finally sealed the deal that this was not a weird looped video of some kind. My son's window is visible on camera and I can see on camera that it is getting lighter outside his room. His curtains keep out just enough light to prevent the camera from exiting night vision, but lets in just enough to be able to tell the sun is rising. I try to figure out what the hell I'm going to do before I leave work. Calling the police comes to mind, but I talk myself out of it. First of all, what am I supposed to say? Someone is in my house that looks like my wife but isn't? Worse yet, what if they are entities of some kind and the police do go over and it kills them or something? I decide to tell coworker about it. He's a firm believer in the paranormal and might have a suggestion. I show him the video and tell him the story. His initial response of "that's creepy as fuck" doesn't help much, but he says he wants to go over and check it out. He says we both should to see if not my wife will try and act like my wife. I tell him absolutely not and he says we should at least go to the house even if we don't go in. I agree on that since I wanted to close the garage. We got to my house and walked around the perimeter first. Not sure what we wanted to accomplish by that, but it felt like something we should do. The curtains were all drawn since nobody was there to open them in the morning, so we couldn't see anything. I went to close the garage and suddenly had this overwhelming urge to go inside and investigate. It was like I just had to know what was going on. So when we walked through the kitchen towards the foyer where the stairs are. It's so quiet in our house right now you could hear a feather drop, forget the pin. We stop at the bottom of the stairs and wait a few seconds. I look at the camera again and they are still sitting there. I've never been so scared in my life. My coworker puts his foot on the first step and I suddenly say stop loudly. Forget this, we're out of here, I tell him. Come on. I start making my way back to the kitchen. We hear a loud creak in the floor from upstairs. It's my son's room. He has a very loud, creaky board right in the middle of his floor that's almost impossible not to step on. My wife and are still deciding if we ever want to fix it because it will alert us if he's ever up to no good when he gets older trying to sneak out or something. Come on, come on, come on. I yell as I motion for him to move his ass. We're out of the house in about 2 seconds. Out on the street I check my phone. Now only not my son was sitting on the bed, same blank stare. Not my wife was gone. My coworker says, "That was stupid as FCK of us, do not tell my wife we went inside. She would be so mad if she found out what we just did." I use my garage door opener in my car to close the door. Before we leave I look at the camera again. Not my wife is back on the bed with not my son, both staring blankly up at the camera, blinking every few seconds. That was all about 4 days ago now. Not my wife and not my son are still sitting on the bed staring up at the camera. They haven't moved a millimeter. We obviously haven't gone back to our house. What do we do? The second story. My son's camera monitor alerted in the middle of the night. I checked it and saw my wife and son sitting on the bed. They weren't my wife and son. Part 2. I'm sorry it's taken so long. It's been an emotional month. I've felt like I'm losing my mind, or already lost it. I've been in the hospital for 3 weeks. You'll remember I left off at my wife's parents' house not sure what the hell to do. My wife and I argued about it. My in-laws said call the priest. I told my wife we're calling the cops and that's it. The day we finally called the cops would be day 6. Not my family was still sitting on the bed, staring at the camera. I told the dispatcher there were intruders in my house, leaving out the part where they looked exactly like my family. I told her we were out of the house but I would meet the police there. She dispatched 2 units. My wife begged me not to go. I told her I had to be there. I had a foolproof plan. I would take her mom's iPhone and FaceTime with my wife while showing the police the camera on my phone. They would see this as a effed up situation and hopefully proceed with caution. My co-worker friend said he would come with me as well. My friend and I beat the cops to my house. Like most of you mentioned in the comments previously, I was packing heat. I have a concealed carry so I had my 1911.45 on me. I was not concerned this would bother the cops as I was going to inform them of my permit and that I was currently carrying. What I wasn't going to tell them was that I had my father-in-law's R15 in my trunk. It's almost funny how many of you mentioned that was the way to go in my previous entry. I didn't plan on telling the cops about it because I was not planning on needing it. They would come armed and prepared. They showed up and I let them know I was armed and then enacted my plan. I initially told them the story. They looked at each other like I was crazy and they didn't believe me. I FaceTimed my wife so they could see she was in fact not in the house despite what our camera was showing. They still didn't seem to believe me but this did pique their interest. I hung up with my wife and told her I'd call her back as soon as we knew something. So now we're sure this isn't a recording, an officer stated repeating what I said. It's not. The day/night cycle has changed every day. Their blinking is erratic and not cyclical like it was a repeat, I said. I know it's a stupid question, but your wife isn't a twin? The other officer asked. I told him no. My friend spoke up, I have an idea. Turn the volume up, I'll go throw a pebble at the window. He went around back while I turned up the volume to the max. Okay, I'm tossing. We heard the light tick sound from outside, but the 1-second delay on the camera came in loud and clear through my phone. Not my wife moved at the sound of the pebble hitting the window, the first time I had actually seen her move aside from the time she wasn't on screen when I initially went inside our house the first day. She turned her head towards the window just slightly, before turning back to the camera. Okay, so this is Liv, an officer said. Okay sir, I need you and your friend to stay outside here. We're going to go in and find out what's going on here. Should you ask for more units? I asked hopefully. Not at this time, we're going to assess the situation first. They don't appear to be armed but we're going to be cautious. I opened the garage for them and they made their way in towards my kitchen door. They radioed dispatch that they were headed in into standby. They disappeared into my house. A few seconds after they went in the camera went out. I wanted to vomit and I felt like if I put my fingers in my mouth I'd be able to feel my heart since it had leapt so far up into my throat. Shit, I yelled to my friend. I immediately popped the trunk and got my rifle out and ran into the garage, my friend right behind me. We got inside just in time to hear a low, guttural howl from upstairs, demonic sounding almost, along with raised voices from the police. There were several shots. Need backup, shots fi. He was cut off. Oh my god. My friend howled. He was scared shitless, but so was I. I knew it, I said running up the stairs. My son's room is the first one you come to after getting upstairs, so his wall is also what you see as you walk up the stairs. As I reached the top I laid into the wall with my rifle. It has a 30-round magazine but I felt like I fired 100 shots. I fired all over the place knowing full well the ammo would go through the wall like it was paper, concentrating on where my son's bed would be but also near the door and towards the floor as well in case whatever these things were thought to duck. We heard shrieks of pain coming from the room, then nothing. My friend and I paused for a minute before deciding to go in because the camera was still out. We heard a whimpering coming from the room. There was a dead cop in the hallway we had to step over. It was awful and I'll never be able to unsee it. His head was several feet away from his body in the threshold to our guest room. We found the other cop in my son's room right inside the doorway. He had several large holes in his torso as if he'd been impaled. Exactly what I was afraid would happen had happened. I called the cops and whatever these things were killed them. When we entered the room we found the source of the whimpering was not my wife. She was laying on her back on the floor, holding her torso that was bullet-ridden and breathing heavy. The scene was awful. I can hardly put into words how awful it was. I know now, just like I did then, they weren't my family. It shouldn't have been hard, I should have been able to just go in and finish it, but instead I fell to my knees. Not my wife begged for her life. "I don't want to die, honey," she whimpered. "I wanted to have more kids, I can't die now." I looked over at not my son, who had to be dead. He'd taken 2 shots at least to the head, or what was left of it. He had several more in his torso and 1 or 2 on his legs and arms. If you have kids, seeing their lifeless, bullet-ridden body is a special kind of hell. Again, I knew it wasn't my son, but it was. I was going to be sick. I'd killed my family. I turned back to not my wife, she was acting just like my wife. It even mimicked her anxiety about death that she has had in the past year or so. It's not her, man. I forgot my friend was even there. It's not her, shoot it. I know what you guys are thinking, how many times has this happened in the movies and you scream at your TV for the main character to just shoot the imposter because it's not their loved one. I guess movies get it right somehow. I'll never roll my eyes at the character who can't kill an imposter again. "Please don't shoot me," it begged. My hands were shaking as I aimed at it. Why couldn't I do it? I knew, this wasn't my wife. "Listen, man." My friend began calmly. "Look at it. Its blood is yellow, it's not your family." Was it yellow? It was. Seeing my family slain was so traumatic I hadn't even noticed their blood wasn't red. I steadied my aim and not my wife suddenly stopped begging. She began that guttural, terrifying shriek and something black or gray started to protrude from her mouth, like a tentacle or something, and I fired. At that range her head more or less exploded. Whatever these things were, they appeared to be mortal. I was still on my knees and my friend was out in the hallway just outside the door. We heard the sounds of approaching police sirens. I'd forgotten one of the cops had gotten a shots fired call over the radio before being killed. It seemed like it had been hours, but it had only been about 5 minutes since the police had gone in. My friend went downstairs to let the police know what to expect. I stood up and slowly made my way into the hallway. I was lightheaded and felt like I was going to be sick. My bedroom is adjacent to my son's, so the doorway is about a foot to the right of my son's doorway. My door was closed, but as I exited my son's room my door opened. Not me walked out into the hallway, wearing exactly the same thing I was at that time. I was shocked in place. I couldn't move, but it did. It walked towards me and its right arm turned black and morphed into what appeared to be a tentacle. It was wiggling around like a squid or octopus appendage. When he thrust his arm at me it solidified and impaled me through my abdomen. It then stabbed me in the left leg just above the kneecap. I fell to the ground in pain. Its tentacle arm was wiggling again. "Why did you kill my family?" it asked. When it spoke its voice changed pitch several times. It was my voice, then much deeper, then normal again. It alternated several times saying that one sentence. It moved in closer. The rifle was gone by I still had my .45. I pulled it out and got a shot off in its right knee. It howled. As Not Me fell to his knee I fired a couple more shots, getting 2 into its abdomen and left side of its ribs. It breathed heavily for a few seconds before I used the last of my strength to aim proper and shot Not Me in the face. Its blood was also yellow. I lay there bleeding out thinking this was it for sure. I still had some strength from adrenaline kicking and so I took my belt off and tried to make a tourniquet for my leg. With my stomach wound it was hard to give it a good yank to tighten it. I then took my shirt off and balled it up and packed my stomach wound and applied as much pressure as I could. Being a nurse probably saved my life. I passed out but the measures I took must have kept me alive long enough for EMS to arrive. I heard raised voices and the sound of pounding coming up the stairs before I went out. It was probably a cop but I felt pressure from somebody trying to keep my wound packed before I went out. I was in and out of consciousness as EMS arrived along with probably every cop in the city. I was wheeled downstairs and put in an ambulance, but while I was being loaded onto the gurney upstairs I heard cops freaking out, and rightfully so. They'd lost 2 brothers and there were 3 other bodies. Did he kill his brother? Are they twins? Probably referring to not me's dead body. Or his whole family? Put him on armed guard while at the hospital. He'll probably be getting charged. As I was getting placed into the ambulance, I saw my friend talking to a group of about 10 cops, all listening very intently to what he was saying. I went out again in the ambulance. I woke up in the my wounds had been treated. The tentacle hadn't been more than a few inches wide, so it was just slightly larger than a large knife. They'd sewn me up and I found that I was currently receiving a blood transfusion due to blood loss at my home. My wife had authorized them to do whatever they had needed while I was unconscious. She was also extremely pissed that I went in the house. We're okay now, but that's a story for another day. I was in the hospital for 3 weeks since I ended up getting an infection and almost went septic. I needed quite a few antibiotics. For the entire 3 weeks I had cops in my room with questions. After about a week they released me and no longer had me under armed guard. I told them absolutely everything, not caring if it made sense or not, and thank God my friend had come with me since he was able to corroborate this weird story. Midway through my hospital stay, men with suits came to pay me a visit. They were government, I knew right away. They said they were FBI, but I don't know if I believe that. They wanted to talk about not my family. The police chief and the coroner were involved and it was very hush-hush. They made it clear this was not to get out to the public. This is where I have to apologize probably for an anticlimactic ending to this ordeal. I don't know what not me and my family were. Neither do they. The only thing we know is that they were sentient creatures that looked like us and had yellow blood. I begged the coroner to tell me about their autopsies, but he said he wasn't allowed to say. He must have felt bad for me, since I received a bouquet of flowers a couple days later. The card inside the envelope read, "We don't know what they are. They have the same organs we do but in different parts of their body aside from their brain. But what's red and pink inside us is green and yellow inside them. They're humanoid creatures, but whatever they aren't human. The government thinks they may be extraterrestrial. Destroy this letter ASAP." We had our house professionally cleaned. It was almost surely a government team since they contacted us on behalf of the police. We could not find any Google reviews or website for the company online. My wife and I are not going to go back to our house. We would love to burn it down, but there's no way to do that and avoid suspicion of arson at this point. We'll end up taking a huge loss on the property since everyone in our neighborhood knows there was an incident involving multiple deaths in the house but don't know what actually happened. It'll be hard to sell, but eventually it will. We're going to move on from here. I told everyone at work it was a home invasion and they bought it. I'll go back to work in a couple weeks and we'll start looking for a new house. Again, I'm sorry. I know everyone wanted a concrete ending and to know exactly what those things were. But we just don't know. Aliens sounds good to me. I've been thinking if they were supernatural or actual demons, gunfire wouldn't have been able to kill them. It's just hard to say. If they were aliens, why did they just sit there and creep in our house for a week? They didn't even try to take over our lives. It's hard to wrap my head around. If it is aliens, keep your eyes peeled out there. There could be more of them. The third story. The old man that followed me. I'll never forget his face. I can see it now, the way he stared, cloudy but focused eyes locked on me like I was the only thing in existence. We were on our honeymoon drive when it happened, gassing up at the only available stop before our 3-hour home stretch. We were heading to a cabin far from home, a wedding present gifted from her family. I don't know if it was the lonely roads or the dark endless tree line, but I was on edge. I had just started pumping when I noticed him, hovering next to a beat-up Ford pickup. It was an older one, with the square headlights and boxy frame. He was minding his business initially, but once his eyes saw me, they never lifted. At first I gave a friendly nod, but when he did nothing but stare, I found the awkward crawl of discomfort setting in. He looked uncomfortable, confused. He reminded me of an extra in a horror film, the figure that was standing off to the side and out of focus. That's how he lingered, even after his nozzle clicked as it was topped off. I stared at the digits on my pump impatiently, keeping him in my peripheral vision as I watched the numbers climb. He was just standing there, staring. Once mine was done, I hung the nozzle up and got my receipt. I gave the old man a parting wave, and he gave me the slightest of nods. He almost looked offended. Yanking the door and ducking in, I could even feel him watching after I got in the car. "You see that?" I asked my wife, who was sitting in the passenger seat. Her face was buried in her phone, scrolling through videos of people doing embarrassing dances. She said tiredly, not quite looking away. Her eyes were haggard, the screen time keeping her awake until we were on the road again. "That old man. He was staring at me," I said, turning the key in the ignition. Our little Honda started up, and I buckled my seatbelt. "What, where?" she asked, looking up away from her phone. She looked around until she saw him. He was still there, standing next to his truck. "Creepy," she said, turning back around. "Maybe he's looking at you," I had joked, putting it in drive and pulling away. I watched in the mirror, the old man's head swiveling slowly as we left. It gave me the chills. "What? At my bony ass?" She snorted, and I grabbed her hand, interlocking our fingers. "Maybe you get the GPS back up?" I asked, pulling back onto the road. The load stretch of lines reflected off the headlights. "Oh, right. Sorry," she said, bringing it up again. The bright GPS screen lit up the cab, and when the blue line on the grid collected itself, the voice spoke over Bluetooth. "In 2 miles, take a right." "We almost there?" She yawned, nestling back in her seat. "Not really," I said, adjusting the rearview mirror. Off in the distance, a set of square headlights was turning out of the gas station. "Can you wake me up when we're close?" she asked, already falling asleep. I watched the headlights for a moment, heading in the same direction as us. I pressed the accelerator further. "Sure thing, honey." Surely it was just a coincidence. I kept my eyes forward, watching for deer in the passing trees. I messed with the radio, trying to find something to listen to. Behind me, the headlights were getting closer. I tuned the dial, and found a station, only for it to be cut off by the automated voice. "In 500 feet, take the next right." I slowed down, watching both the headlights and the upcoming turn. I thought of the old man's stare, and how he stood perfectly still, never looking away. Just picturing it made me shudder. "Turn right." I slowed and cut the wheel, turning onto another long back road, one that looked shadier than the last. My wife opened her eyes for a second, before snuggling back against the door. "In 3 miles, take a left." I kept driving, both hands on the wheel. I was tired as hell, every yawn watering my eyes and making me drowsier. I rubbed my face, massaging my cheeks to remove the stiffness. I watched the mirror subconsciously, waiting for the truck to fly past. I watched silently, seeing the glow come closer and closer. I watched them slow and pan over, the headlights bouncing on the old suspension. The truck was still following. Honey, wake up." I nudged her, and she groaned. What?" She stretched. "That old man. He's following us," I said, my hands gripping the wheel. "What?" she said, looking behind us. The truck was gaining, chugging behind us through the night. I tried to go faster, but it kept speeding up, the headlights getting closer and closer. "Maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe he lives around here." "You didn't say something to him, did you?" she asked. "No, nothing. I tried to wave. That's about it," I said. Maybe he'll turn off." Ahead was a traffic light, the soothing green glow like a beacon. I sped up to try and catch it, but almost as if in spite, it started changing, slowing down again. My eyes darted between the traffic light and the truck. It practically flew up on us, headlights blinding in the mirrors as we stopped for the red. The truck was loud, a big engine and old exhaust echoing right behind us. My wife looked behind us and shielded her eyes. I stared at the red light, as if my will would make it change faster. "He's getting out," my wife said, and my blood ran cold. "What?" I asked, checking the side mirror. "Babe, he's got a knife." She squeezed my shoulder, looking frantic. In the mirror I saw him close the truck door, and started walking up to us. I saw the light hit the blade in his hand, and he started shuffling faster, his image growing as I watched. I said, clamming up. "Go, babe, go 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 go," she yelled, and I looked both ways. The light was still red. The old man was at my window. I stomped on the gas and the tires squealed, the car lurching as it caught traction. We blew the intersection, and I watched the dark silhouette shuffle back to his truck and throw open the door. In the light of his cab I could see him hitting his steering wheel. "In 1 mile, take a left." We sped away, trying to put as much distance between us as possible. The truck was moving again. But my head start had bought us time. My wife turned in her seat, watching the truck struggle to keep up. Ahead, I saw the green rectangular sign for a back road. "In 500 feet, take a left." "Hang on," I shouted, slamming on the brakes. "For what?" she shouted, but grabbed the overhead handle anyway. Spinning the wheel quickly, I turned right instead, and gunned it down an unfamiliar, unkempt stretch of road. The pavement was poor and cracked, the lines barely legible in the center. I swerved to hit potholes and broken sticks. "What are you doing?" she shouted, holding on for dear life. "We gotta lose him," I said, nervously watching the mirror. "Make a U-turn." The road was dark and winding, taking us up hills and under old railway bridges. I squealed on every curve, our little car struggling to miss the many obstacles in the road. Garbage bags. Old mattresses leaned against brush. The trees were dead, towering above like withered giants in the dark. Make a U-turn. The road grew thinner and more desolate, the shoulders turning into deep, treacherous stitches. I checked the mirror again. Nothing but darkness. It was getting harder to see. I turned the brights on, and it only added to the discomfort, lighting up hundreds more wicked branches and scattered trash. "What do we do?" my wife asked. My mind raced. I didn't really know. "I don't know, call the police," I shouted, and she unlocked her phone. The bright light hampered my view, the glare infecting every window. Ahead the road straightened out, getting even more narrow. The tires bounced as the pavement transitioned to gravel, the static of it droning and plinking against the wheel wells deafening us. Ahead, a large orange sign reflected our light, but the high beams were too bright to make out the old lettering. "Babe? Make a U-turn." I squinted at it, having no choice but to slow down to the lack of road. I read the sign, big black capital letters echoing in my mind. "Babe, I don't have enough signal." Ahead the road was gone, the sparse gravel blending to dirt, then grass, then nothing. Dead end. The ground ahead ceased to exist, the sheer drop of a cliff waiting on the other side of the old sign. Behind us, the headlights were coming. I parked the car, witnessing the impending doom of the light catch up. Not enough room to turn around. Nowhere to go. Frantically I searched the inside of the car, looking for some kind of weapon. Tossing aside old documents in the center console I found a flashlight. The truck pulled behind us slowly, blocking us in. I tested the flashlight, the batteries were dead. Still better than nothing. "Stay in the car," I yelled, and threw open the door. "What do you want me to do?" she cried, looking from me to the truck. "Lock the doors." I gripped the flashlight in my hand, hoping the weight of it would give me courage. It didn't. The old man emerged from his truck, hinges creaking loudly as he pushed his door shut. The knife was in his hand, like a spike protruding from his arm. He was breathing hard, his shoulders hunching as his chest heaved. "What the hell do you want?" I shouted. He took another step forward and stopped, his shadow in the headlights frozen. He craned his head for a moment and stepped back. He moved stiffly, his moments slow. "Why are you following me?" I shouted again, stepping forward with the flashlight. I could hear my wife sobbing in the car. I was tired of running. I raised the flashlight and marched toward him. He raised the knife, ready to stab. I grit my teeth and reared back, ready to swing. I saw his face in the dark, his piercing eyes staring just as they had at the gas station. I brought the flashlight down, hoping to knock the weapon from his hand, and stopped. The old man was crying. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice choking. I lowered the flashlight slowly, and he lowered the knife. "Why were you following us?" I asked, lowering my voice. He looked so thin and frail, even in the dark. He put his arms down. Both hands squeezed into fists. He looked like he wanted to walk away, his steps hesitant, shaking. "I'm sorry. I thought you were my son. I was wrong. I'm sorry." He looked away, trying to shield his face. "Wait, what?" I asked. I looked to my car, where my wife sat on edge, her mouth hanging open. "When I saw you at the gas station, I thought you were my son. You look just like him. But it couldn't be. My son passed away, a long time ago now. In a car accident. But you look just like him. I wanted to be sure. I had to be sure. But your voice. You're not him. You're not Peter. I'm sorry for scaring you. You must be terrified," the old man said. "But the knife, at the light, you were coming at me with a knife," I said. It didn't make any sense. I know. I didn't think that through. I let my emotions get the better of me. I'm just an old foolie. I got this for my son, all those years ago. I thought you were him. I thought maybe, if I could get it to you, you could move on. And I can move on. But I made a mistake. I saw what I wanted to see. I'm sorry." He choked, and started backing up. I looked to my wife, who threw up her hands in confusion. I held up a finger and mouthed, "Wait a minute. If you want to press charges, I understand. I'll wait here. For the police." He turned, and started walking back to his truck. I went after him. "Wait, hang on a second." I called after him, and he stopped. He was so much smaller and thinner up close. I guess at the gas station, I saw what I wanted to see too. I gave him a hug. He resisted at first, but when I didn't let go, he gave in and returned it. We stood there for a while. I let him cry for as long as he needed, standing in the square headlights in the middle of nowhere. No press charges, no stabbing or clubbing. I motioned for my wife to get out, and when she joined us, I explained what happened. "My name is Tom. This is my wife, Gina. I'm sorry for almost hitting you. And I'm sorry about your son," I said. "It's all right. My name is Wallace. I'm sorry I scared you good people tonight. But thank you for giving me your time. You didn't have to do that, I appreciate it. Before I go, I think I'd like you to have this. I can't hang on to it anymore." He held out his hand, the hunting knife in his palm. Inscribed across the blade were the words "for my son." I took it, and promised to take care of it, under the stipulation that he take my number so we could talk again. He seemed to enjoy that, and after a hug farewell, and even a few laughs, we parted ways. I watched him walk back to his truck, his head held higher than before. He opened the door and looked at me for a moment, giving a final wave before ducking in. I found myself freezing briefly, before nodding and waving back. Behind him, barely visible, was a man, his hand resting lightly on Wallace's shoulder. He nodded to me with a smile, and after the old man climbed in and shut the door, he was gone. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.